Welcome back, folks, to my WrestleRant video series where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today I'll be talking about the 1997 installment of Survivor Series, which is, of course, notable for one very match and moment at the end of the show, the Montreal Screwjob. But before we get to that, kicking off the show was a traditional 4-on-4 elimination tag team matchup pitting the New Age Outlaws and the Godwins against the Headbangers and the New Blackjacks. Pretty standard elimination tag team match. It was interesting to see the New Age Outlaws before they joined DX and the campy gimmick that they had, like the whole cowboy thing going on. It was really weird, but before they had the whole rebellious nature of their characters, that's what they were. So it was interesting to see them in that element. But aside from that, though, this was a pretty fine tag team match for what it was. No different than any other really traditional elimination tag team match. I mean, I watched this a couple days ago, so I don't remember it too perfectly. But that being said, though, I mean, given who was involved, it wasn't the most memorable match of all time. But like I said before, one interesting aspect about this contest was seeing the New Age Outlaws out of their usual rebellious nature that would later be introduced as part of their characters in early 1998. Up next, we had another traditional 4-on-4 elimination tag team matchup pitting the Truth Commission, the Jackal, the Interrogator, Sniper, and Recon against the Disciples of Apocalypse, Crust, Chains, 8-Ball, and Skull. Fucking weird tag team matchup here. Did not understand, did not know any of the guys involved in this matchup. This very, very gimmicky. I mean, I know this was kind of before the cusp of the Attitude Era. One can even argue that the Attitude Era kicked off on this show with the Montreal Screwjob later on in the night. So I guess you can kind of count this matchup before a part of the campy nature of the program. But I don't know what the fuck this was. There was just a lot of weird gimmicks and weird characters in this matchup, so it was just kind of hard to follow. It went about 10 minutes with the Truth Commission going over, but just a really weird tag team matchup. I was not focused on the in-ring action at all. It was all about the fucking weird gimmicks, and it was just so weird. So I didn't even care about the match itself or care about the in-ring action. It was just all about the gimmicks, so for that reason alone, it was just like, I was just blown away by how dumb this all was. But anyway, though, moving on, we had another 4-on-4 traditional elimination tag team matchup. The best of the three up to this point, pitting Team Canada, the British Bulldog, Jim Neidhart, Doug Furnos, and Phil Lafone, against Team USA, Vader, Goldust, Mark Merrow, and Steve Blackman. So, Team USA, I found it funny, though, that they came out to Kurt Angle's entrance music, what he would later use to be his entrance music. I don't know if this was before or after the Patriot was introduced. I think it might have been before. I'm not exactly sure of the timeline of when the Patriot was in WWF. But it was funny to see them come out. I thought, because I knew for a fact that Kurt Angle had debuted at Survivor Series, and I thought it might have been on this show. It wouldn't have been until 1999 that he would debut at Survivor Series, a pay-per-view that I will actually not be talking about here on WrestleRant. Unfortunately, I don't have the time. But even still, though, I thought that was pretty funny. But Vader making up Team USA, that was comical. Goldust, also kind of comical. It was just a really weird match with who was supposed to be compromising Team USA. Goldust, Mark Merrow, of course, Sable was with Mark Merrow at ringside, and this was around the period of time that she was starting to overshadow Mark Merrow in the ring. So he really didn't do anything for this matchup whatsoever. Sable was the one to watch at ringside through this entire contest. And Steve Blackman was his usual awesome self, but Team USA was just really a mismatch of misfits in this contest, and Team Canada was very entertaining as well, with the British Bulldog, Jim Neidhart, Doug Furnos, and Phil Lafone, like I said before, coming out victorious in this contest. So it was very funny to see Team USA, who they were made up of. It was a good matchup, and like I said before, better than the previous two matches, even though that's not saying much. But this matchup was only notable for the fact that Team USA came out to Kurt Angle's entrance music, and Team Canada picked up the victory. Of course, in their hometown, in their home country of Canada. They were in Montreal on the show, obviously, hence the Montreal Screwjob. So it made sense for them to go over, and of course, they were the baby faces pitting against Team USA, who were the heels. But I just found that funny, though. Up next, we had Kane one-on-one with Mankind, and remember, this was only about a month removed from when Kane debuted in WWF, attacking The Undertaker at 1997's Bad Blood event in Shawn Michaels' Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker. So, that, like I said before, this is only about a month removed from that, so he was still trying to find the legs as an act. People were just still really intrigued by it. I don't think this was his first singles match. It might have been. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if he wrestled on Raw before this. But this was definitely his first singles match on pay-per-view. So for that reason alone, that makes this match somewhat noteworthy. Mankind, I didn't really like the fact that, I know Mankind had his history with The Undertaker as well, and it wouldn't be until 1998 that they would have their Hell in a Cell matchup. But I didn't really like how Mankind was just another guy in this matchup. It just felt like he was a job guy. The matchup went about 10 minutes. It wasn't the greatest technical matchup in the world, obviously. But it would have made more sense because Kane dominated most of the matchup, and Mankind, he was not a WWE champion at this point in time, but it would have made more sense had they used someone of a lower caliber face Kane instead, like an enhancement talent, instead of a guy that was going to go on to become a WWF champion. Of course, that wasn't planned at the time. But that was just a little bit weird, though. But it was notable for the fact that it was Kane's first singles match on pay-per-view, with, of course, Paul Bearer in his corner. So up next, we would have our fourth and final elimination tag team matchup of the night, pitting the Road Warriors, Road Warrior Animal and Road Warrior Hawk, against Ahmed Johnson and Ken Shamrock, against the Nation of Domination, The Rock Farouk, Kama Mustafa, and D'Lo Brown. So the Nation of Domination just running wild over the WWE. It was only a year prior, remember the 1996 Survivor Series, like I said in my 1996 review, that The Rock made his debut, and then a year later he's one of the hottest heels in the entire company, a part of the Nation of Domination. Of course, not the leader just yet until they would kick Farouk out of the group. But it was a fun tag team match, went about 20 minutes, and of course the Road Warriors are always awesome, so it was great to see them on the team. Ahmed Johnson and Ken Shamrock were good as well. I always liked Ken Shamrock. I thought he deserved more in WWE as a singles competitor. But I mean, it's really hard to analyze these multi-man traditional elimination tag team matches because a lot of them are just really all the same. And after watching one after the other and watching them all in the WWE Network within the course of like a week or so, they all just start to blend together in my mind. But this one kind of stood out because the Nation of Domination was involved. Great heel faction of the late 1990s. And just kind of showed the evolution of The Rock from just only 1 year prior at the same event he made his debut at. So for that reason alone, I thought it was pretty cool. But a good matchup nevertheless. Up next, my favorite matchup of the night, aside from the main event, this kind of goes without saying, Stone Cold Steve Austin against Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. Remember, it was that Survivor Series of that year that Stone Cold Steve Austin had his neck broken at the hands of Owen Hart at SummerSlam. And that was how he won the Intercontinental Championship. Even though Austin had broke his neck in that matchup, he wanted to stick to the plan. He wanted to keep on going, so he beat Owen Hart with his shitty-ass roll-up. Of course, I don't blame him, given the circumstance, obviously. But Steve Austin would win the Intercontinental Championship on that show. He would return to the ring shortly thereafterwards in a 4-minute matchup with Owen Hart on this show. Now, I haven't really been exposed to a lot of Owen's Hart work. I haven't watched a lot of pay-per-views from the early 2000s, or not from, he was already passed away by that point, from the late 1990s, I'm sorry. From the early 1990s to the late 1990s, when Owen Hart was obviously in his prime in the WWE. I haven't watched much of his work on the WWE Network yet, so this was kind of one of the first of many singles matches I'll probably watch of his on the network, but he was so freaking hilarious on this show with the Owen Hart 316 I Just Broke Your Neck t-shirt that he was wearing. I mean, maybe you look back, 1997 it wasn't considered tasteless. Maybe if you did something like that in 2014, like when that guy, I can't remember his name escapes me right now, the guy who broke his neck a couple of years ago in TNA in 2012 at the hands of Zema Ion. Zema Ion never really hammered home the point that he was the one that broke his neck. He was a heel at the time, so we did kind of mention it from time to time, but they didn't make a gimmick out of it like Owen Hart did with Stone Cold on this show. But regardless of whether you thought it was tasteless or not, I thought it was fucking hilarious, and I thought it was great. The only disappointing thing about this matchup was the fact that it was only 4 minutes. I mean, it was fun while it lasted, but maybe Stone Cold still couldn't have gone at the rate that he could have, considering he broke his neck only 3 months prior to this. So for that aspect of it alone, I understand why it probably went that short, that brief. So if that was the case, I understand, but I was hoping more of a matchup between the two. But match or no match, it was a very fun angle, very fun feud between Stone Cold and Owen Hart. Owen Hart was such a great fucking heel on his own, and his feud with Bret Hart, with Steve Austin, and all the other feuds that he would have in WWE over the course of his career. So that was great, even though it was a 4-minute matchup. Up next, we have the Montreal Screwjob, of course, Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. Bret Hart walking in as WWF Champion, though he would not walk out with the title intact. Now, I don't want to go in depth about the whole Montreal Screwjob, my thoughts on it. Do I think it was a work? I don't think it's a work, for one thing, but I don't really want to analyze the entire thing. But the match itself was good. Obviously, it paled in comparison to their Iron Man matchup a year and a half before this at WrestleMania 12. So, I mean, it wasn't the same matchup. I mean, I think they did some brawling beforehand, so that kind of took away from the matchup. The matchup was only 12 minutes long. I was very skeptical because the match started so late in the broadcast that it's like down to 20 minutes on my WWE Network thing because it shows how much time is left of the pay-per-view before it ends. So I'm kind of getting a little skeptical as to how far this matchup is going to go, or how long the matchup is going to go. And it really wasn't that long at all. I mean, it was a very good matchup, but you can't really expect it to be as great as their Iron Man matchup from a year and a half prior, when that matchup was given an hour and this one was only given 12 minutes. But even still, the whole Montreal Screwjob, the whole, the presentation of it, of course, it wasn't planned, from my opinion anyway. Just the way everything went down. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, my good friend John, at JohnKnapp17 on Twitter. Follow him if you aren't already, cheap plug. We were talking about how a lot of the things that you watch in the Monday Night War documentary, Wrestling with Shadows on YouTube, and how they show Bret Hart spitting in Vince's face and all this other stuff, writing WCW in the air, and everything, all the other mannerisms by freaking out at ringside, all this other stuff that was a part of the Montreal Screwjob, a lot of that is cut out on this broadcast. And it's not cut out because it's the WWE Network, because of course, like I said before, they would show all that footage on the Monday Night War show, also on the WWE Network. They're showing the original pay-per-view in its original form, not edited, nothing like that. That's exactly what it was as you watched it live. A lot of people watching this, if you watched it live, you know what I'm talking about, but for those that were like me and didn't really see like the things that you see in the Monday Night War documentary, like when did this happen, where did this happen, it's because that was the original form of the broadcast, and though that stuff was caught on camera, it didn't make the air as soon as they went off the pay-per-view. But it was just so crazy, though. Shawn Michaels, there's literally like a minute left on my WWE time counter thing. Michaels, the bell is called and whatever else. You see Earl Hebner just leap from the ring and just make his way right up the ramp, just fleeing the scene, so to speak, making a beeline towards the exit of the arena. Shawn Michaels doing the same exact thing with the WWE title in tow, just looking so distraught at ringside, along with Vince McMahon. Bret Hart looking angrier than ever. So a really interesting scene, and I think probably the biggest takeaway from this was the fact that they cut almost immediately away from the action. I mean, as soon as the match ends, it only goes on about a minute. Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler at commentary are questioning the entire thing on commentary, like, what happened? I didn't see him tap out. They're not going to say that he got screwed, obviously, because in their ears, they were thinking it was a different finish. There was supposed to be a DQ finish. Bret Hart wasn't supposed to lose the title, whatever. So they're really, really confused. And Jim Ross talked about this in a podcast, in an interview with Sam Roberts a couple of months ago, or earlier this year, depending on when you watch it, in that he had no idea what was going on. Kevin Dunn was counting down in his ear, who I think was in production at the time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Kevin Dunn. Counting down from 10, JR had to sign off immediately. You just see Michaels making his way towards the back, and that's it. The feed just cuts out, and that's it. So it was a really abrupt ending to an otherwise very controversial moment. Easily the most controversial moment in all of wrestling history. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but just to watch it all unfold was just really, really interesting. But what a hell of a way to kick off the night, or to end the night, rather, with a new WWF champion, Bret Hart's final match in the WWF for about 13 years, of course, until this atrocity of a match at WrestleMania 26, with Vince McMahon, the same man that screwed him over on this show. But just a very, very intriguing series of events. I mean, if you follow the Montreal Screwjob as closely as a lot of people have, and watching the Monday Night War documentary, reading up on it, watching Wrestling with Shadows on YouTube, and all this other stuff, I mean, I've heard the Montreal Screwjob talked about many a times over the years that I've been a wrestling fan for the last 6.5 years, but never once, surprisingly enough, did I ever watch it. Even in the last 8 or so months, 9 months since I've had the WWE Network, did I go back and watch it. Because I'm the kind of person that wants to watch the entire pay-per-view as a whole, not really go back and watch match or this match and not that match. I like to watch the pay-per-views in a whole as they were, in general, you know what I mean? Not just one specific matchup. So I didn't really want to go back and just watch just the Montreal Screwjob. I wanted to watch the entire matchup, and I waited until just recently to watch the entire thing. But it definitely was not what I thought it would be in terms of like all the controversy and in terms of like not showing everything Bret Hart actually did. But I understand why they didn't, because it was the original airing of the pay-per-view. But even still, if you follow it very, very closely, the Montreal Screwjob, that is, you will find the original airing of this pay-per-view to be very, very intriguing if you haven't seen it already. But aside from that, though, there really wasn't much from the show that was really all that noteworthy. Stone Cold winning the Intercontinental Championship was, of course, newsworthy. And that was a very fun angle, but the match itself was only 4 minutes long. The main event, obviously, go out of your way to see. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. Everything else that was really not great. It was all pretty much forgettable. The four 4-on-4 traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team matches were not great. They were all good for the most part. Some of them a little bit more memorable than others. but for the most part, they were not spectacular. There wasn't a lot of storyline going into any of them, for that matter. And of course, Kane's first singles match on pay-per-view was kind of newsworthy for that moment alone. But of course, all this pay-per-view will ever be remembered for, obviously, is the main event between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart and the Montreal Screwjob with Vince McMahon and everything else that went down, and Earl Hebner as well. So, obviously, I wouldn't go out of your way to see... I mean, like I said before, I'm not the type of person that wants to watch one match and that's it. But if you are that kind of person, definitely don't waste your time watching the entire show. It was not a great show. But only go out of your way to watch the Montreal Screwjob in the main event, everything else, and as well as Stone Cold versus Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship right before that. So pretty much just watch like the last half an hour of the show. Everything else is pretty forgettable at best. But if you like the year of 1997 and the whole Attitude Era, and you want to get a feel of what it was like before the Attitude Era really kicked in, this was kind of it, with all the campy gimmicks and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely go out of your way to watch the Montreal Screwjob. Like I said before, needless to say, that kind of goes without saying. But as well as Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. So, with all that being said, folks, thank you very much for watching. Always appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, Facebook at Graham GSM Matthews. In my next WrestleRant video, I will be talking about the 1998 installment of Survivor Series, which featured the Deadly Games tournament to crown a new WWF champion. So a lot of interesting talk and debate to discuss in that video. But until then, I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch you guys then.